Hello, listeners out there. This is Ryan O'Halloran, VP of Security Strategy here at Imbalance IT, bringing you our latest episode of the Balancing Act podcast series titled Supply Chain Reaction. Today, we're going to discuss the supply chain pressures that are hitting enterprise IT environments, including rising NAND, DRAM, and hard disk drive prices. There's component scarcity, and what it all means to your infrastructure for your planning in 2026 and beyond. It's going to be a great episode. I have with me back Mr. Mike Caplan, our Chief Technology Officer. Mike, as always, great to see you.
Appreciate it, Ryan.
Appreciate you in advance. And then let's just jump right in, right? So there's a lot happening across the supply chain, as we mentioned, and organizations are starting to pay attention, and then the stakes are getting higher and higher. What are you seeing on the ground right now with the NAND and DRAM and hard disk drive pricing, and what's driving it and how bad is it?
Yeah, let's just start with, everybody's two favorite words in technology these days. And really it's going to come down to artificial intelligence. The public cloud providers and the neo cloud providers, so the groups that are, kind of cloud adjacent that are trying to deliver infrastructure for AI specific use cases. They're projecting their demand, 12, 18, 24 months in advance. And as a result of this $600 billion capital expenditure wave that's happening, all of these companies are doing these massive commits for these really precious resources. All of the supply chain providers that are making NAND, DRAM. So DRAM, the server memory that people are looking for, NAND, NVMe drives, SSD drives, and even now hard disk drives are all basically being fully allocated to those vendors because, hey, they have a $600 billion commitment from these providers. And that is putting a tremendous squeeze on, your end user customers that are looking for, hey, I need to buy a new server, or I need to plan for, a refresh of my technology because I still exist in the data center and the assets are 5 or 7 years out. Maybe there's a big, VMware code upgrade that I need to do. And in order to do that, my hardware needs to be refreshed. And that's just creating this tremendous squeeze. We've seen prices basically just skyrocket even over the past 6 months. A server that maybe would have cost $40,000-$50,000 towards the end of last year is now 3-4x more expensive now. And the problem that's happening is that this is just going to continue. By most projections from the server manufacturers, the storage manufacturers, they anticipate this not being something that's going to recover in 3 months or 6 months, but this is a long-term change through at least 2026 and likely even through 2027. So the pain is here and it's real, and it's really affecting a lot of our customers in terms of how to actually plan for the fact that what they budgeted for last year is just no longer a realistic budget target.
Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine too, like we talked, the pressure on the customers is horrible. From an OEM side, that's got to be a different risk appetite for them and a different way that they're doing business, probably a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more friction, I assume. Are OEMs like, your Dells and HPE and Lenovo, are they honoring what's already quoted, or are clients getting hit with these huge surprises, or things getting ripped away with from them? What are you seeing at this point? How bad has it got there?
Yeah, it's all kinds of bad. I don't want to sugarcoat it here. It's really painful. A lot of the vendors have updated their terms and conditions where even if you've fully executed a purchase order, they, depending on how long it takes to actually theoretically ship the equipment, they're coming back to customers and saying, hey, this doesn't work. I was at an event yesterday and different partner was telling me about how they had a hedge fund in the East Coast that placed a relatively large order. We're talking millions of dollars of anticipated compute that they needed to buy for their annual planning because they were trying to get ahead of the fact that lead times are extending to 6, 12 plus months to get equipment, and the prices are just going to continue to increase throughout the year. They placed an order on Friday. The order was canceled by Sunday by the OEM, and they said,
Whoa.
we will actually honor the price. We won't honor the price. We will honor the purchase, but it's now, it went from $14 million to 40. nobody can budget for that appropriately. This is fundamentally, and I've heard countless similar stories of what feels like a bait and switch, and it's leading to this is now becoming a board level conversation. CIOs, CEOs need to be able to plan for what that next evolution of their business is going to be if they can't even guarantee that the contractual commitments that they've made to their vendors is actually going to be honored because the pricing just gets out of whack in a matter of, in this instance, 48 hours. That's just unrealistic. You can't plan for that. And so customers are going to have to start working at being a lot more strategic in terms of their planning, very similar to how these cloud companies and AI companies are, if they're going to even continue to make on-premises purchases, which realistically they may not because the pricing economics just no longer make sense.
Wow. That's a tough pill to swallow. And also, I think a lot of it too, which is issues before, but these have to be exacerbated, would be where am I at in my refresh cycle, not only for my finance guy, but for my tech guy who already has all this stuff. He's trying to be AI wizard and all that. I mean, if you have those expansion projects, inevitably you do, right? We know they do. How can you protect yourself from these overruns or extended lead times when they're being that aggressive to companies that large? I mean, I can only imagine how they treat the little guys.
Yeah, honestly, at this point, it's clear that there's fundamentally no protections. One of the vendors published their updated terms where even if the equipment is getting ready to ship, they reserve the right to ask you for a new purchase order based off of what they think the infrastructure should cost now. The demand for IT projects and business velocity is not slowing down. So customers are going to have to at the board level, start making better plans. They have to be able to strategically think not what's happening this next quarter, but what's going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months. How their overall strategy may change and how their purchasing decisions may change as a result of the fact that the economics, unless you're, probably a Fortune 50 type company or a company where, capex and investments, you are willing to potentially pay a gigantic premium to keep the infrastructure on prem. For your smaller organizations, the pinch will be even more real, especially with the fact that for the longest time, customers were doing these planning sessions around 3 to 5 year life cycles, maybe even longer, because there already has been macroeconomic conditions leading to a tightening of the checkbook here. So people have to change, people have to evolve, and what we're trying to do is help advise them on what are the optimal strategies for going forward in this new world order, basically.
Yeah, I love that. Procurement teams have to be freaking out. I mean, they're dusting off all their agreements and they're like, wait a minute. So the natural tendency is to think about, okay, is it time to buy in bulk? Is it time to buy a whole bunch of toilet paper before it runs out? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the question always is, do we wait this out? And honestly, I think some people will choose to hold off on buying things. I think it might see a dramatic shift towards, if you aren't in the cloud today, okay, now's the time to really strongly consider, if you've been cloud averse or, smaller deployments in the cloud, now's the time to seriously consider, adopting cloud as that burst environment for you. Because if you just need the enough capacity to get a new virtual machine or a new application or a new project off the ground, it probably will fundamentally be cheaper at this point to do that than potentially wait 6 to 12 months. Businesses traditionally can't wait that long for driving differentiation, driving capabilities, driving new experiences for whoever their customers are. And so they have to be smart about that. Some will do the panic buying and trying to buy in bulk and do that. And if they have the funds to be able to pay, basically what feels like pay to play at this point, they'll get the resources that they need. And that's great. The other customers that maybe don't have that budgetary flexibility from an annual basis, some may want to look at, strategic leasing or other vehicles that maybe can keep their budget in line now. But again, they're then potentially signing up for multiple years of still paying down an asset that realistically would have been, a third, maybe a quarter of what the cost should be, if we rewound the clocks even 6 months. And then the alternative option is if you just want to buy time, there are of course solutions out there that can help level set what are you currently using in your environment. I don't want to name any specific tool, but being able to take a look at, you know, is there fundamentally waste in your environment? Are you over allocated on CPU resources? Are you over allocated on RAM? More often than not, most people tend to operate in a very conservative way. And the answer is usually yes. And if you can eke out at least a near term optimization, I'm thinking about how FinOps really was the model for teaching customers how to be cloud smart. Hey, I've got over allocated resources. I've got wasted resources by, not being able to do that, properly or being, very conservative in what they're allocating. That methodology is very much going to apply to how you're actually treating your on-premises resources because the pool is no longer infinite. And you can't just say, well, we can just buy one more server because you might not get that server. So there are solutions out there that can help with that, continuous optimization and right sizing to give back to your application owners that defensible argument. A you might think you need 16 virtual CPU and 96 gigs of RAM, but this thing has never peaked more than 4 virtual CPU and 16 gigs of RAM. And with resources being at such a premium right now, everybody has to be in this together to say, yes, I will right size near term. And if I need to expand, okay. But that might buy you enough time to also feel like you're then comfortable moving into the cloud as a potential burst or, leveraging some similar solutions because honestly, even the hosting providers out there are also going to be actively scrambling and everybody's trying to pull from the same pool of resources and it's just continuing to get worse. It's this, vicious cycle that's happening. The panic sets in, people start buying, resources become even more scarce, the price goes up, and then the cycle continues back to the panic buying incident. So what we're trying to tell our customers is take a second, take a beat, know that every server vendors telling you you've got to get the purchase in now or you might not get it. Realistically, you might not get it anyways. And we can be thoughtful. We can give you a plan. We can give you that roadmap for how best to address this based off of your budget, based off of your capabilities, based off of your needs versus getting you into this panicked brain state of feeling like you have to go be dysfunctional and go tell your board, I need to execute a purchase order in a method that's never been done before because if I don't, I won't get the resources. Like that's purely FUD at the end of the day. And we're trying to provide clarity and thought leadership around how best to address this problem.
Makes sense. I'm just sitting here thinking to myself all the years of being like, no, sorry, the cloud's not cheaper. And now it might be.
You're not
It's
wrong,
so, I know it's
especially
weird.
for again, a small amount of additional capability. Now, if you're talking, a multi-petabyte new
Sure.
application or service, the question could then still be an economic one of whether it makes sense, and sometimes it might, and at some point the cloud providers may end up increasing prices. As of right now, they've held relatively steady, which is great for their opportunity, especially if they're the ones getting all of this infrastructure. They'll be able to provide that. I think that's a conversation that is customers are going to need to consider. I don't think cloud is a nice to have anymore. It's going to be a need to have, and it's going to be very much paired up with the rest of your overall IT strategy. And that could probably give the board better time to think, what is the value of buying all of this hardware ourselves? And is there a strong need to maintain that? And if there is, great. Just know that the economics are going to feel very much upside down at this point.
Yeah, to say the least. Michael, I really appreciate your time today. It's very clear to me now what's going on and the different things that need to be, considered throughout this. I guess, for the listeners out there, imbalance can help you navigate this uncertainty, right? There are procurement strategies, there are vendor negotiation tactics that can help you accelerate these hybrid or multi-cloud roadmaps, whether it's now I have to So whether you need to lock in that pricing, right size a refresh, or to Michael's point earlier, cloud first alternatives, we can help. So we understand there's a problem. We're empathizing with this problem and trying to find creative solutions to help, right? And Michael, thank you for sharing some of those with us. If there's any interest out there to anyone hearing this, reach out to us. InbalanceIT.com. We'll set up a discussion. And until next time, thank you for listening.